I was first offered a position here in 1981, began in January '82. I didn't know much about Georgetown or the Jesuits, and I made some efforts to learn about it. One of the first people I talked to was Rabbi Harold White, who had been hired by Father Jerry Campbell about 42 years ago. And when Father Campbell had hired Harold to be the senior Jewish chaplain at Georgetown, Harold said to him, well, there aren't very many Jewish students at Georgetown. And Father Campbell replied, but I want you here for all the students. Karski, both as a devout Polish Catholic and as somebody whose life was marked indelibly by his concern for, his care for Jews and Judaism, I think it speaks volumes about Georgetown. I might also mention that I, in addition to being a professor and former chair of the government department, for the last half dozen years I've chaired the executive committee for the Program for Jewish Civilization. And that was created with the strong support of the president, the provost, and the deans. And Jan personified that integral relationship between Jews and Catholics at Georgetown, which I think is both a hallmark of the university and speaks very well of it.
When I saw the question that was going to be asked of faculty and staff, two events that I remember about Jan immediately came to mind, and they all emphasize the moral commitment that Jan had in all the things that he did. The first is the course on theory of communism. In the old days, I don't know whether you had it in your time, but in the old days, Jan would teach the theory of communism by taking the role of a communist and asking the class to challenge him. And he did a magnificent job, of course, of turning their arguments around in a way in which communists often were able to do. And what always struck me when he did that was the fact that there was a moral purpose behind it. And he was trying to get the students to see that. And when finally somebody would ask a question that would have a moral dimension to it, he'd immediately seize on it and then make the point that he wanted to get across in the class. The second thing that comes to mind, let me just say a little story about his ability to talk as a communist. There was a famous time in 1951-52 when we had a public meeting at the Department of Agriculture for staff people of the Department of Agriculture. And its purpose was to try and show what was wrong about communism. This was the days of McCarthyism, okay? And so this was a very important topic. And we asked one of our colleagues, Jim Atkinson, to be the American spokesman who would demonstrate what was wrong. And we asked Jan to play the role of communist. And we fortunately had a break between the two. In other words, they were first going to speak, and then secondly, they were going to ask, or rather answer questions from the audience. Well, Jan did such a superb job of being a communist. Frankly, we were worried. So during the intermission, I went up to Jan, I said, Jan, you're convincing people. Stop, lay off. And he did. Well, let me get back to my second thing that again showed the moral integrity that all of you have already pointed out, but I personally experienced it at a meeting that was at here, where was it now? It was here at Georgetown, and he was going to speak for the first time that I had ever heard him speak about his experiences at the Warsaw Ghetto, when the underground made it possible for him to get there and actually witness what was happening. It was one of the most moving experiences I've ever had in my life. To this day, I can't forget how he built up his point. And his ultimate point was, and I'm surprised no one has mentioned it, but as far as he was concerned, it was the second original sin that man has committed. And he's waiting to see when finally that second original sin can be taken care of. And the way in which he built up to this, because he was, of course, an excellent orator. He knew all the tricks of the trade, as someone already has mentioned. And he did this superbly. I was always amazed how well he could speak. But when he really got himself involved in talking about the Shoah and his experiences, it was really one of the most moving things in my life. And so I'll always remember him as a person with tremendous moral integrity that conveyed this with tremendous ability as a speaker.
Absolutely. I would also